All right, so I want to welcome everybody to our co-occurring disorders virtual community of practice. My name is Maggie Giles. I'm the ADEPT Center coordinator and happy to be organizing this monthly resource for the workforce. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about coping, helping our clients cope with holiday-related stress, helping our clients get through the holiday season as safely and successfully as possible. And I wanted to just start with saying a couple brief remarks about the holiday season in general. One thing I wanted to add is that on the William James College website, we're going to be having a web series of resources for you to help you in supporting your clients. So look for that. And so just a couple of remarks about why the holidays can be particularly stressful for our clients. And then we are very lucky to have 5 clinicians who are going to share a little bit of their work with clients during the holidays and how they are able to support their clients. So first of all, just wanted to say that the holidays can be an incredibly stressful time under the best of circumstances. So even for those people for whom the holidays unfold sort of as advertised, they can be stressful. So even if holidays are particularly a happy or warm event or series of events, and people are able to spend them with the people that they choose to, and those are healthy relationships, they can still be stressful. There can be unrealized expectations. They're not unfolding the way holidays in the past used to, or they're not unfolding the way that commercials tell us they should, or that the Hallmark Channel tells us it should. They could, for better or for worse, our school and our work routines could be thrown off because of the holidays. We spend so much time shopping or cooking or traveling for the holidays that we spend less time on self-care. We eat more than we want to. We spend more than we want to. We sit around more than we want to. We relax and practice self-care less than we should. And all of those factors are going to be so much more stressful this year as a result of COVID. So traveling, shopping, getting together with people are all going to be more stressful. And then if you add to that for those for whom the holidays are not particularly pleasant experience, this can be a very fraught time. So for some, being around family can be a very stressful thing. Old tensions can reemerge. For those that are in unsafe families or who are unstably housed, it can be even that much more unsafe or dangerous. And people who are not spending time with loved ones, who are more isolated or experiencing loneliness, it can be a particularly stressful time. If you add on top of that the fact that in many cultures, including and widespread across this country, that in many cultures, celebrating often goes hand in hand with having more alcohol present. And we know that alcohol can be a depressant. Alcohol can exacerbate depression and other mental health issues. It is a disinhibitor, so alcohol can sometimes contribute to people making decisions that they might regret later. And then to circle back, if somebody is experiencing stress during the holidays or has an underlying depression or mental health or anxiety disorder, they might be prescribed benzodiazepines, which some are very commonly used with alcohol, which is a very dangerous drug interaction, or can be a very dangerous drug interaction. Using both alcohol and a benzodiazepine can amplify the effect of both, and both are central nervous system depressants. And so mixing alcohol and benzodiazepines can increase the likelihood of overdosing or overdoing it on either. It can increase the risk of accidents. So somebody might think to themselves or know about themselves that they can, say, consume 2 servings of alcohol safely or in a way that feels manageable to them. But if they're consuming those 2 drinks in addition to being on Xanax or Klonopin or something like that for holiday-related stress, then that could actually lead to some dangerous drug interactions. And then finally, for people who have experienced trauma in the past, the holidays can be a particularly stressful time. And we know that stress can overwhelm our coping strategies and our self-care routines. And so there are things that we can be doing now to help our clients prepare for the holidays, so that the holidays, we can maybe replace some of the chaos of the holiday season with some planned actions so that our clients can get through the holidays in as healthy and successful a way as possible. So tonight I'm going to be switching to speaker view in a second, and we're going to just go around, and some clinicians who have some experience with helping their clients get through the holidays in a safe and healthy and successful way as possible are going to share with you some of their strategies. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Miriam Irvin, and she's going to go first and share a little bit of her work with clients. Take it away, Miriam.
Hi. So all of this is just what I've experienced as a clinician, but also have experienced with friends and family, and how the holidays can affect those that I know are struggling with addiction, and also who know they're struggling or don't know they're struggling, or what I see happens. And Maggie, what you mentioned about drinking on medication is, I think, something that we really take for granted. And it's a good note. Many people aren't actually educated about the medication they take by their physician. And it can be minimized a lot, what the interactions are with alcohol. So that's really a helpful reminder. One thing that Maggie and I discussed would be helpful to bring up is when people who are in recovery, or maybe would like to be in recovery, would like to drink less, would like to use less, and know that the family system is one that is really trying for them, or the holidays with their family is something that's very triggering for them. I always give them the option, and we just leave it on the table, or stay open-minded to it, or curious about what would it be like not to spend the holidays with your family. And for many family systems, this is a no-no, or this has never been done before, or it's an insult, and it's just not done. And we kind of come up with ways in which you could have a holiday without the family. You could tell the family you don't want to spend the holiday with them, or you want to, but it's not in your best interest in some way. And one thing Maggie and I discussed is this concept that when you are understanding family dynamics better, and there is possibly codependency and enmeshment that is revealed in your recovery and in the client's sort of work that they're doing on themselves in addiction dynamics, there's an understanding that what's best for the family system and the homeostasis of the family system is not always what's best for the individual in recovery. So although things have always been done a certain way, and that's what feels comfortable and less quote unquote chaotic, or let's say less conflict oriented, or maintains someone's place safely in the family system, may not always be what is best for someone's recovery, and may not always be what's aligned with their routines, with their needs and stability, and sobriety. So when that's the case, and I can think of a few examples, but one could be when the family is drinking a lot during the holidays and they're not willing to not stock the alcohol, or not have the alcohol, not offer the alcohol. That would be a very specific example of a family homeostasis that compromises someone's recovery. And if that person identifies, it's a huge trigger for me. I don't really want to be around alcohol at all this holiday season, but I have to, because I'm going home and they're not going to stop serving. So we consider, well, what if you didn't go? What if that were a full stop? That was kind of the hard line that you draw to whether or not you go home or be with family for the holidays. And the other thing that might happen is, I won't be able to go to meetings, or won't be able to keep in touch with my sober network. They don't, my family, we all do things together, and you can't really step away from the system when I'm doing my, when I'm doing my work that is my sober work, what might be going to meetings, sitting with my sponsor remotely, or talking to them on the phone, or going for a walk, whatever it is, going to the gym. I know that will fall by the wayside when my family's around, or any individuals around whose family where there's that dynamic, because I don't want to offend them, or they'll give me a hard time, or whatever it is. These things seem small at the moment, and depending on how much time you're spending with family on the holidays, it can add up. So then you end up not going to a meeting for a week, or you end up not ever talking to any of your sober network the whole week, or you end up not going to the gym at all, or you end up not taking 1 minute for yourself to read literature that might be helping, or writing, or any of the self-care. And these things this is losing sight of your routine, and all of those healthy habits and thinking and ways of being can be the start of relapse for many, many, many people. So there you have it. It could be they relapse maybe over the holidays, or they relapse after the holidays, but that holidays might have been the build up to it. So we consider the option of just not spending time with family over the holidays. And how do you even say that? And how, so with my clients, it could be everything from a very straightforward coach to on a phone call with a family member about saying no, and this is what I'm going to do instead, to really considering what the feelings are that come up, the guilt, what feeling comes up for you? What are you afraid of? What is the reality of what will happen next versus what your catastrophic thinking tells you will happen next? And it's good practice for boundaries in general, right? So if you can hold the line and the boundaries with family, you can probably do it with anyone, right? Because it's really all about that at the end of the day anyway. Where your sense of boundaries comes from is the family system and the caregivers and So it's an interesting time of year, to be sure. Right now with COVID, many people have already made that decision because they can't go home for the holidays. So that's kind of a built-in excuse for many people if they choose not to see family or be exposed to the dynamic. And at the same time, there's the other side of that is maybe family supportive. Maybe it's something that people are lacking at a time that they need it the most over the holidays. But that's that was what I thought might be a helpful tip for clients when thinking about maintaining sobriety. And even if it's not sobriety, maintaining a healthy relationship with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much, Miriam. I was thinking about how sort of preparing your client to tell their family. You could even role play that conversation or something, right? Like that's really cool. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So maybe,
You're welcome.
Danny, do you want to jump in next? Danielle?
I can indeed. Good evening. I'm Danielle Owen. I am a social worker and NADC one here in Massachusetts for the last 16 years. And I've helped people through a lot of Christmases, a lot of holidays. And when I moved here, I was introduced to Thanksgiving, which was a brand new one for me. So it's almost like having two Christmases, which was interesting in two ways, because you're preparing, because I work with a lot of immigrants who would also have never had the Thanksgiving holiday. So you're preparing them essentially for two holidays that they're not familiar with and don't have a context for, and as well as working with people for whom you don't have a context of until you have this conversation with them. So it's I have a couple of things. I think if speaking to any students or anybody who wants to learn about what's the most useful tool when you're to have in your tool belt with relapse prevention, there's a lot of material out there. Some of it is helpful, some of it is not helpful. I think the key source that I have found helpful in the last 20 odd years, who just passed away recently, actually, was Terry Gorski. He was based in Hazelden for many years. He has, it's considered old-fashioned, I guess, but I still go back to it every now and then. It's well thumbed, his relapse prevention book. I can send Maggie the reference. So I kind of tailored my my input tonight around that, although I feel like Miriam touched on a lot of there's a lot of crossover, so we'll leave it at that. But I think in terms of what folks can take away with themselves tonight when you're preparing for the holidays, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of have a conversation with your client, especially if you've still yet to get to know them a bit better, if they're not familiar, say, with stages of change, or you haven't done much psychoed with them. So the relapse prevention conversations can be very, very helpful. And my goal primarily when I'm sitting with a client is twofold. Helping them understand that they can get through it, that the self-efficacy, they have the skills to get through it, and that I believe they have the skills to get through it. So you can have all the tools in the world, but if your client does not believe that you believe that they can get through it, they're you know, that you're going to hit a wall. And I think part of that too is if you've only just met them or you're working with them for a long time, the beauty of working with them for a long time is you can pick out ahead of time some examples that back up what the tools are going to need as they move into the holidays. Like, I've seen you respond to this situation before and you did this and this. I've seen you respond to this and you did an amazing job. And if you could implant that self-efficacy early on, it really does wonders, because there's, as Maggie referenced, as Miriam referenced, there's so much fear coming up to the holidays for a lot of folks. And the belief, it almost feels like it's magic. When relapse happens, it feels like it's magical. It just sneaked up on me. And invariably what I say to them is, well, actually, there was probably some markers, you know, a couple of weeks or even a couple of months beforehand, you know, and so we talked about these markers before, but coming up to the holidays, there might be a few other ones. And Miriam has touched on a lot of those already. But I think one message I try and get across to my clients is like basically the harm reduction message, which is, okay, you know, whatever happens is going to happen the next few weeks. We're going to aim for the best and prepare for the not so great. And really what you want to try and do is, if the worst case scenario happens, and again, there's a way of doing that without taking away from the self-efficacy conversation. But it's like, if the worst case scenario happens, we have a plan for it. You're probably not going to need it, but we have a plan for it. So I feel like self-efficacy and harm reduction is really, really helpful, because being able to limit the harm, being able to reduce the opportunity for a full relapse as opposed to you know, a lapse. And having that conversation too is about what are you and I going to define as a lapse? What are you and I going to define as what a relapse is? Are we talking like a whole weekend of drinking and then stopping? Are we talking about just using a benzo once and then not going near it again? Like, trying to get their definitions and not impose yours on them, simply because a lot of my clients are used to having that imposed on them from meetings, from maybe other clinicians. And I think part of the self-efficacy work is being able to say, no, this is your tool belt that we're talking about. You get to define what relapse is for you and how we can prevent it. What are the flags that we can use? Terry Gorski's stuff is super helpful because he breaks it down in terms of, you know, what leads to a relapse? What are the high risk situations? And you're talking about like negative emotional states. And Miriam and Maggie has referenced that already. Like, we're invariably with Thanksgiving and Christmas, we're talking about winter, especially up north, in the Northeast. We're talking about, you know, sad, depression, you know, all of these pieces. So there's the negative emotional states, but also reminding them that there could be a positive emotional state, like there's a lot of excitement. And it's almost a sense of like, we're on holiday from my recovery, and being able to have that conversation around making sure that we know what that means. You know, is there a belief hidden in the back somewhere, hiding behind the chair, kind of going, we're just going to pop up and go, no, it's a surprise. We can do this. You know, we can just use for one day and there'll be no problem. And it's amazing when you realize, when your client in front of you is realizing that they're not just one voice in there, they have multiple voices, right? Like IFS, whatever you want to call it, but there are multiple parts within them that are going to have a response to this conversation. And so being able to give them an opportunity to talk about that, to detail exactly what they're hearing. On one hand, there's a part of you that wants to do this. On the other hand, there's a part of you that wants to not let anybody down, and all of that conversation. So I think that's really helpful. So the intrapersonal, so there's determinants within the person, and there's the external stuff too, which, you know, Hallmark and everything that people have mentioned, you know, there's a lot that goes on with the holidays and a lot of expectations. And I think if there's a way to help the client to reframe what their expectations are around the holiday. And again, it ties in with what Miriam said around like the family systems, and giving yourself permission to make a change in a family system is huge. But I think the expectation being, bringing it down to, it is one day. It is one day on the 26th of November. It is one day, the 25th of December. And, you know, you're going to go to bed on the night before and you're going to wake up the next day, and then there's going to be a day after. And just giving them that sense of that there's not this big abyss that's going to happen on those days really helps build up their self-efficacy. How am I doing for time? Because I have a wicked habit of long.
We could, if you have a final remark or two,
I
we
do.
could move on.
That sounds good. I'll leave it at that. So I think the one thing I would love to, and I hope I'm not stepping on anybody else's notes with this, but the one thing I've found super helpful, and it's useful anytime during the year, but it's a key part of the psycho-ed conversation that I have with clients, is the use of HALT. I'm sure people are familiar with meetings, have used it before. So you've got hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. It's a great little package just that they leave with, simply because it helps you have the conversation around what's going on in their brain, what's going on with them physiologically, as well as the emotional piece. If you're hungry, if you're angry, if you're lonely or tired, that's going to be a high risk situation. And with the holidays, how many of those are going to be involved, right? And so you're talking about kind of low risk to kind of higher risk. I don't know if they're Star Trek fans, but essentially you have this like yellow alert, red alert, and then there's like, you know, light speed. Let's get the hell out of here. So there's all of these different levels, and HALT gives people a concrete way to measure, where am I right now? What's going on in my body right now? You know, and if they go through that list, immediately they're kind of going, oh yeah, no, I haven't slept last night because I was worried about such and such. Oh, right, I haven't eaten. And, you know, and I frequently give the example, and this is my last piece, I promise. I frequently give the example of, you know, the Snickers ad where you have like these famous people and they're going against their, you know, Elton John being like a rap star or something. I can't remember the ad in particular, but basically when you're hungry, you're not yourself, right? And it's the same with that's, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of our basic needs. If any of those needs are not being met, it's going to leave us vulnerable, because our brain goes to, doesn't tolerate pain. So it's going to go to the one thing that it used to use all the time to feel better, whether it was alcohol, opiates, whatever. And so being able to identify that, having that conversation with clients, it's really quick, it's really easy. They can write it on their hand, they can take away with a note, but it's super, super helpful. And the other piece too, just to tie in, I promise this last, tie in with the medications. You mentioned benzos and alcohol. If you have somebody who's on a medication-assisted treatment, you're talking about methadone, you're talking about Suboxone, Vivitrol, they all will have contraindications for alcohol. So definitely have that conversation ahead of time. That's my piece. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Danny. That's all wonderful. And I noticed that our presenter, Gail Crump-Swaby, Dr. Gail Crump-Swaby has joined us, and I'm going to actually tag her to go next. I'm not going to give her any chance to settle in and get comfortable because when I was talking to Gail earlier, a lot of what she was saying actually ties in nicely with Danny, what you were just saying. So Gail, can I put you on the spot and have you share for a couple minutes about what we were talking about earlier?
Sure, you already put me on the spot, so that's fine. That's okay. Yeah, so thank you for having me in the space. So I just got the tail end of what Danny was saying, but as I was speaking to Maggie earlier today, we were talking about, you know, a particular client that I've worked with, and many. So a lot of the clients that I work with are clients of color. So I specialize and make sure that I focus on working with the BIPOC community. So a lot of the clientele that comes into our group practice are primarily BIPOC. And you know, a lot of the work that I have done as it relates to substance addiction has a lot to do with, I was telling Maggie in terms of this one particular client I was working with, and the importance of us having a conversation, because within many BIPOC communities, it's about relationships. It's about building relationships, and family relationships are so key and so important. So even in situations where you have an addiction or you have some other stuff going on, sometimes you don't get, it's not an okay thing to say, oh, I'm not going to show up at this family event because the family is so key and so important. It's like those things, we don't talk about those other things that are going on because the loyalty is to the secrecy. So then therefore we're going to come together as a family, we're going to have fun, and we're not going to discuss those other things that are happening and going on. So I remember having that conversation with this particular client because she said, because my thoughts were, well, what are how are you thinking about showing up at this particular event? What are some options that you have? She says, well, my only option is to show up because I cannot not go. And of course, I unpacked that with her in terms of why she cannot not go. And she explained to me, she says, you don't just not show up to a family event because then you become, ostracized for doing that. And she says, and furthermore, I love my family. I enjoy being around my family. But of course, I am challenged by the fact that because we always have, alcohol at these events, it's a challenge for me. So we talked about that, and I was able to really help her put together ways in which she can still show up and be at this family event, yet at the same time take care of herself in the midst of it. So one of the things we talked about was, because relationship was so key and important to her, I asked her to think about, alcohol as, because that's the thing that she was having difficulties with. Think of it as her relationship to that and what that means for her. And I first started with, think about family relationships you've had that hasn't gone well, or you're having some difficulties or some challenges in that relationship. And I said, think about a relationship you had with an ex-partner and what that was like, and what did you do to really, sort of separate yourself. So can you begin to think of alcohol as this relationship that didn't go well, didn't work very well, and how are you going to, work through that in terms of, let's say you showed up at, your family event and you and Aunt Mary didn't get along very well, but Aunt Mary's going to show up anyway, right? How are you going to manage that? So I had her think about writing a letter to alcohol saying that we have broken up, the relationship is over, and I know I will see you at other places and other events, but I want you to know that we're not going to engage in any kind of, relationship, or, we have an understanding. So she wrote a really beautiful, I had her to go home, think about, how she's going to write this letter. And she did. She went home and she did that. And she brought it back. And she says, well, I wrote this letter, but now what do I do with it? I said, well, I want you to carry it with you, to your family event, so that it's with you, so that in the event that you do see alcohol, you have it and you can remind yourself that you have this letter. And so I have this I learned of this app. It's called Journey, and it's really a journaling app. So I encouraged her to download it and to transfer that letter onto her journal app on her phone, so that she has it easily accessible to her. So that if in the space, and she said sometimes her family member, come on, just take one drink, you'll be okay, that kind of stuff. And I said, and you can even, share this letter if you want to, or you can explain it the way that you and I talked about it, in terms of this relationship that you don't want to be involved in anymore, but you do understand that because alcohol has become part of the family event, you don't have to engage with it. So that's what she did. She took it with her. And then the other thing we talked about was making sure she had a family accountability partner. So I had her think about who in your relationship, who within your family that is showing up at this event that you have a very close relationship with, that you can trust to hold you accountable in those moments when you may feel the urge, or you may have a family member that is kind of, edging you on and saying, come on, let's say her name is Mary. Mary, come on, it's just one drink kind of thing. Who do you have? And so she told me who that person is. And I says, well, one thing, I said, does that person have a cell phone? She says, yes, they have a cell phone. I said, can you talk with them about a code word so that if you're not in the same space with them during the time that maybe you're feeling these urges, or, a family member, can you just text them? And you and them know what that code word is. And they come to that room, that space where you are, and help you to sort of transition out of that space, or distract the other person who's trying to encourage you to have a drink. So those are some ways in which I worked with her, because I had to take into consideration the culture of, her family and how her family viewed alcohol within the family. Mm-hmm. So that was, so because it's so important when you're working, especially with BIPOC populations, the importance of understanding, especially when it comes to, substances such as alcohol, what role it plays in family events. And I think it happens in a lot, but it's sometimes look very different within those cultures in terms of what role it plays, and the importance of, we're here. It's always a part of how we celebrate. And yes, I understand that you are trying not to have a drink, but this is family and this is what we do, and how can we do this? So it's was helping them to really think about it in the full context of, their culture, and how do they, navigate that when they're in those kinds of spaces.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Gail. And a good reminder to clinicians that we should never make assumptions that we know what holidays mean to our clients, and that we should just come right out and ask them, just, tell me about what holidays do your family celebrate, and what are they like, and all that kind of stuff, to make sure that we're not making assumptions. I have an experience of a relation who did not let the rest of the family know that he was no longer drinking alcohol, and he would just very subtly position himself so that he was always the designated driver everywhere. And I was the only person that knew that was what was going on. So I could also be the one that could sort of, back him up, when he said that he couldn't drink anything because he was driving and stuff. But that's great. And so thank you very much for that, Gail.
Welcome.
And when you were talking, I was thinking, Felice, about your what you were going to share with the group, because it's sort of the flip side of what, especially what Danny and Gail shared. So maybe I'll turn it over to Felice now. And I muted you, so I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was sneezing there. Sorry. So this is about a mom, and she's like in her late 50s, and she's got 3 kids. And she came to counseling when her 21-year-old daughter left her 3rd rehab without becoming sober. And she was, she and her husband were essentially just beside themselves with grief and remorse, and we need to get her on the track, and whatever it takes, et cetera, et cetera. But by the time the 3rd round, I was with them actually through the 2nd and into the 3rd. I really had to kind of help them recognize the need to let go of their expectations, as well as the control. We had an interesting conversation with the whole family. I did some whole family work around how, mom was super, very much in charge of making sure everybody had their toothbrush and toothpaste, and that she would really, like flip her wig if people weren't, getting it together. And so, so I'm just kind of gathering these little clues about recognizing the extent to which she could be very controlling. So as she started to, her daughter did not come home after leaving the 3rd round of rehab. She did go off on her own and just say, you know what, I'm not ready for this yet, Mom. And so, a lot of coaching with her. And she also joined something called Learn to Cope, which I guess is maybe um, an Al-Anon sort of a similar thing.
We
Does
have
anybody?
someone here who can speak about that in a second. It's not
Yeah.
on, but yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. Okay. But so she'd go to these meetings and then she'd come to session and she'd be saying, "Ah, other people are telling me that I shouldn't talk to her unless she's in recovery, that I shouldn't, give into anything that she's doing unless she's in recovery, that I shouldn't have her in the house. I shouldn't give her anything." And so, she went through a lot talking about, I want to be in touch with her. I know I want to see what she's doing. And eventually it kind of got to like, I don't know how to be with her without asking if she's working on her recovery. And she would get to like, what is enabling? Like, so very good, lots of questions about this. And of course, here we're coming into the holidays. And she is, was saying, the people in my group, they're telling me that there's no way that I could possibly have her for the holidays because, she doesn't abide by my house rules. What am I going to do? Et cetera, et cetera. And so, here's where we got to talk about the difference between enabling and helping. And also, I did help her see the distinction between, what, of course you want to love your daughter. Of course you want to be in touch with her. Of course you want to keep the door open. You don't want to, right? Her instinct was, I don't want to reject her. I don't want her to, leave or think that I don't want her to be my daughter. However, at what at how to do that, right, without enabling. And so, what we did was we kind of went through a lot of scenarios, but, the essence of it was, helping her understanding that enabling, makes it possible or even encourages her daughter to remain stuck, to remain immature, to remain irresponsible, and ultimately to remain in addiction. Kind of helping her recognizing that, distancing with love, what does that look like really? It allows the enabled one to know that their family is giving them the choice of self-determination, really, to move toward recovery, trusting that they'll do so in their own time, allowing, and, because mom, encouraging her to love but not try to control, allowing her to foster a connection of mutual respect that would build over time. And also kind of helping her understand that enabling is essentially, love that it looks like fear. It helping turns into control. Helping her understanding that enabling is toxic and actually pushes people apart instead of bringing them together. So we went through a couple of situations, one of which was a simple family get together. And she was very much, should I not do this? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I said, I think the best thing is for you and your husband, her, the dad, to get clear idea of how you want the evening to go. And, just be really clear with her about what you expect. And proceed from there, as opposed to trying to control her drinking, asking her what she is or isn't doing, or is she in recovery, is she not in recovery. I said, really, you're there to be together and enjoy some food and have some good conversation. And so, luckily they have means, and they had a situation where they could be together at this time of COVID with, doors open, things like that. But around the alcohol piece, and this is kind of interesting because it kind of shifted, she was like, well, I want to be able to have a glass of wine. But I'm really worried, like, should I hide the wine? Should I, all the ways of controlling and manipulating the daughter's access to alcohol or not. And kind of going back to the idea of talking about the expectations, was saying to her, if this is a typical situation where the family does enjoy alcohol and you feel, that you're willing to do so without controlling her amount, her access to it or not. It's not that you have endless bottles of wine. You have what normally you would have. But just being clear with her that she doesn't need to try and control her daughter's recovery process. So that apparently went well, much to her surprise. And then, of course, the holidays come along. And so, in this situation, we were able to really talk about, the role of family and alcohol, similar to what Gail was talking about. I'm sorry, what the role of alcohol in the family, as well as, sort of what typical patterns have been during the holidays, and how it is that she wanted it to go, and how she could set the tone by setting clear expectations um, around the event. And so, we sat together and really kind of helped her set the tone for realizing, like, okay, you know what? Well, I'm going to set the expectations in a really neutral way, like I would with any guest. So it's not like I'm focusing in on my daughter. She's the one that must be, controlled, or she must be the one that we're going to sort of tiptoe around. It's that these are all the expectations for all the guests, with their, the children and their significant others. So it kind of turned into an overview of, social distancing. There's already many boundaries already there. They have 2 elderly parents. There's some, the sleeping circumstances, as well as all the other things, and alcohol was one of them. And what she decided is that she wouldn't serve alcohol, given that and the other piece that was really prevalent here was the other siblings' relationship to the daughter. They're very highly emotionally charged, given the boundaries that the daughter had broken over the past maybe 3 years. So there was lots of difficult feelings in the room. And so, in talking about sort of how you can or cannot, what's helpful versus what's enabling, she determined, nobody's going to have alcohol that day. It's too much of a charged situation for all of us. I have to worry about what she is or isn't doing. And then we can all be together. So the focus was on, let's be together. So to kind of put an overview on this, interestingly, I was going to set up my own little diagram of sort of enabling versus helping. And I went on Instagram and found like somebody had done it for me. And so given the shortness of the time, I'm like, all right, let me just use that, because it's a really good comparison, and possibly, just a good way to talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen. So this kind of covers a lot of the different conversations we had. So looking at enabling is lying to others and yourself about the addict's behavior. So she talked about talking to her parents, talking to her other children, what should or shouldn't say. And, I was like, you know what? The secrets, right? We're only as sick as our secrets. It's not a doubt in anyone's mind that she's got a drinking problem. So, admit to yourself and everybody, this is not going away. She's not going to suddenly fix herself. And we're not going to fix her either. We know she has a drinking problem. Enabling putting the addict's needs before your own. So, she would spend a lot of time saying, well, I feel like I've got to make sure she has a place to live. We kind of went through, as she's transitioning out of the sober house, she herself had become an absolute nervous wreck. And the idea of having her daughter come home, she's like, I can't do it, but I feel like I'm going to be a bad mom. All the things. So, I was helping her know, you know what, you need to come first. You are literally falling apart at the seams. She's also had her father, a 90-something-year-old father who was clearly on his way. And, put yourself first, and then, don't put your daughter's needs first, right? She's going to figure it out. She's 21 years old. And then, I encouraged her to go to Al-Anon. That's where she learned to cope. She's been in therapy. This is the first time that she's been in therapy. And it's almost like this kind of brought her to her knees on this subject. We talked a lot about what enabling, because she asked the question a lot. We had several sessions like, what is enabling? I just don't get it. And we talked a lot about, bailing the addict out of their messes, or really doing things that will make sure that they don't reap the consequences, of their actions. And so, helping is, on the other hand, letting them experience the consequences of their behavior, whatever that means, which cause a lot of On the one hand, anxiety for her, but as we kind of talked about, that she needs to get out of the way of allowing her daughter to fully feel what it means to be an addict, to be an alcoholic, and the things that were happening to her as a result. Mom and dad had spent a lot of time in the past, since she was maybe 17 or 18, getting her out of messes, and they kept therefore getting increasingly angry and resentful. So we talked a lot about the emotional impact that it had on her and her husband, and the other siblings. And so really it was a whole family event of, let's get out of the way of the impact of alcohol on the daughter. We talked about the money piece, because mom did let her go and live on her own. And she said, I found my daughter living in an office that was part of a garage. But she did go and visit. And what I encouraged her, go visit, take a walk. You don't need to talk to her about her recovery. And she said, yeah, I'm going to bring her some food. And, so she came and showed up, kept the door open, and really had a good experience with her daughter, and one that she very much feared, because she was like, I can't stop myself from talking about what she should or shouldn't do in her recovery. So she brought a dog, she went for a walk, she brought some, pasta, and they got to be together as opposed to being at each other about the addiction. And, parenting the addict and feeling resentful, well, that's the parenting itself, right? And so it's, she did list, she, especially her husband, very angry, absolutely in disbelief that their daughter could go through 3 rehabs and not get it. As she said, she's got to get it. I've given her all the opportunities. And so, in helping her set boundaries, I'm like, lady, what are you doing for yourself? You are working yourself hard, and then you are scurrying around. And she has literally spent actually the child's entire life scurrying around, making sure that she got her needs met, and increasingly as she became an alcoholic. So working with her on setting boundaries, and then really giving the young person, she's 21, or she's an adult, the addict, space to take control of her life. And so not doing things like, she did cut her phone, only such that she could use it, as opposed to having endless data. She's like, her room is a mess, what should I do? And I said, well, it's her room. It's not your job to be worrying about that. So, what we're talking about is just allowing her to release release her fear and anxiety and her need to control, because that's how she thought she was expressing love. And then that was from Cindy Acevedo, and she is the person who created Instagram. So I just wanted to put her credit. And then I just like this, in that, it's a good graphic, in that, it's similar, but it's sort of like, are you loving someone to death? Because I know a lot of people who have an addicted loved one, they're just like, I can't let them I can't not do all these things for them, because what if, so we went through these things, actually, money, car, phone, paying for a place to live. We didn't get to the bailing them out of jail, but, but instead we talked a lot about, she brought the pasta. She's showing up herself, getting treatment, the mom is, making sure that, she can be available when possible, when she's not working, for her son, her daughter. And we talked a lot about, of course, the disease, so comparing it to diabetes, right? It's like, helping her know that it's not that her daughter was acting against her, but really she's in her disease, and she's, literally can't get out of her own way, and it's her journey. And so, this is also a Raw Recovery Talk, which is, again, somebody on Instagram who produces a lot of nice graphics for these things. But so the points here that I guess are so significant is that I really resonate again with what you're saying about the holidays, and how people feel like, I can't not have my daughter over, so she felt super judged by her recovery support community for, like, well, if you allow her, then you're letting her drink, or then you're making it easy for her to drink. But what I said was, what you're doing by not enabling her and by actually loving her, showing that love, which doesn't mean that you're going to, enable. It means that you are having the door open. You're leaving the door open for her to come home, be that person that that she can turn to when she is seriously maybe going to drink or has already gotten herself into a mess or whatever it is. By being present doesn't mean that you're going to fix it. It means that you're listening, you're attentive, and you're saying, look, baby, I just love you. And I know you're making some rough choices. So, and it's uncomfortable, right? You're like sitting with those really hard choices that she made and not fixing them. And so, around the holidays, like I said, it did turn into her very much setting some very clear expectations. And I mean, we're still going to have another conversation about it, like, tomorrow, the next day, right? But that, she was kind of working through, and I said, well, sit with your husband and figure out what it is and what do you want the holiday to look like? And how do you let everybody know straight up what's going to happen, and that, you're welcome to come on those terms. So there I am.
This is great. Thank you, Felice. It's like expectations and boundaries weaving through all the different presentations tonight. And I know that we have to hear from John last, but Lori, I don't know if I can put you on the spot, because one thing of all the things you said, Felice, which are so helpful, the one thing is you might have inadvertently gotten a misperception of what Learn to Cope is. And so we are so honored to have with us tonight one of the leaders of Learn to Cope. And so, Lori, do you want to just briefly maybe give us a quick summary of what Learn to Cope is?
Sure. And I'm just a facilitator at Learn to Cope, but not one of the leaders, but I do promote it because I think it's a great support network for families when they're going through these questions. It's a peer-to-peer support group that now meets virtually. So basically anyone from anywhere can get onto a Zoom call and meet with families who are going through many of the same things that they are, and can share experiences, strength, hope, and resources, which is really the nature of it. So I think, having the option to go to a counselor is great, but there's a lot of people out there who will not walk through that door. So it's one of the first steps, and it's something that we often encourage people at the meetings. Have you ever thought about, depending on what's going on in that family system, because sometimes there's a lot bigger issues than anybody can deal with in a support group. So one thing I would add to the family piece that I know we talk a lot about in the meetings is grieving. Grieving helping the family see that their vision of a holiday and how wonderful it's going to be is not necessarily how it's going to happen, and to acknowledge that they need to think about their loved one as someone who is dealing with a substance use disorder, that they have an illness. Like you said, several of you have said, they're not coming at you to hurt you, but you might want to consider how you can show your love that's not in the typical fashion. And I loved your example about, if you want to have, even in COVID, we can't do this, but in a normal year, you can have the normal family celebration and say to your loved one, if they're going to bring chaos into your house, I really want to see you. Can I come meet you someplace else? So that you set the boundary that the holiday is going to be the holiday that we think, we should have. And this individual, we love you, but we can't, our boundary is we can't have you in our home when you're actively using, and it just brings too much chaos. So I think giving people permission to do that is really hard, because, everybody wants their loved one in the home, but sometimes that's not a safe option for the family and for the individual. So that's one thing I would add. And I think I'll let John speak, because I think my Learn to Cope piece, it's been a huge help for a lot of families. So thank you for referring her or helping her find us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lori, for putting a little bit more, sort of filling that out a little bit more for us. That was really great.
Lori, would you be able to share the link to your group? Is it an open group for people, and would we be able to refer our clients to it?
Yes, if they just go to learn2cope.org, there is a link there that they can click on. It will send them to someone who can give them the appropriate link, because obviously we don't want people just joining the meetings
Yep.
that are not, it's the only way to control it. And that way we can try to, Kathy Day, who does that, will also try to match them with a group that probably is going to be the best fit for their
Right.
situation and geography.
That's nice. Okay,
If they're close by.
great. Thank you.
Sure.
And so, John, do you want to add anything to this conversation about supporting our clients through the holidays?
Sure. I mean, I obviously want to echo what everyone has said. I mean, it's like I can't do anything except repeat what everyone has said. But I mean, I think it's like thinking about holidays. It really makes us think about how we approach milestones and norms in life, and what that's like for people just existentially. And the holidays aren't just reserved to this time. There's anniversaries, there's holidays throughout the year, and so it's important as therapists and clinicians to be mindful of that, and to just like be prepared. And it really makes me think of like healing is about change, and healing is about kind of like approaching situations and from many different perspectives. And the holidays in some ways are an opportunity for people to start to develop like those skills to start to see things from a different perspective. Like thinking about what's going to be different, acknowledging aspects of grieving, what that experience of loss is going to be, could be like, and essentially kind of like answering that question, like I can't not do that, right? And it's like, well, is that 100% true? And let's really start to investigate, like, is like, what would it be like if you didn't go, or what would it be like to kind of view the holidays from a different perspective? A lot of my work has been kind of residential treatment with young men, so it's a lot of focusing a lot on safety and stabilization, really helping people have a plan. What it's going to be like when you go there, who are you going to talk to, what's your exit strategy, things like that is really important. How to say what you want to say, those situations, in certain situations. Use it as an opportunity to discuss boundaries with your clients, and also discuss boundaries with your family and things like that. Be prepared for kind of like relationship dynamics to change, and like within families, like people were part of that system, and then all of a sudden you've switched it up because you're getting treatment or in recovery. So there's going to be some issues within the family potentially. So just being prepared for that. And I also see it as kind of an opportunity to like, what would it be like to spend the holidays with the new community maybe you've been developing with the sober community? Maybe this is an opportunity to spend the holidays with the new family that potentially you've created through the 12 steps, or through another smart recovery, another type of program. And in some ways, like one of the ways I address, like I would always talk about the like not going is like, think of what a gift you can in some ways give to your family, of like letting them know that you're safe, that you're taking care of yourself, and you're kind of giving them peace in some ways. And that's really kind of all I wanted to share. I think it's I always like to use the holidays as kind of an opportunity to really reflect and kind of like see the situation from maybe a different perspective for the clients that I work with. So
that's beautiful. Thank you very much.